Hi, I'm Maggie, and now we're resuming the series on Kabbalah and the women of the Bible. So far, we've looked at Eve up here in the supernal triad, and we've looked at Sarah right down here in Malkut, and at Rebecca here at Yesod, the foundation. And now our story moves on to Leah and Rachel. Leah is at the place of Hod, which is the place of communication, but it's also known as the place of the trickster. And the commandment that it relates to in the Ten Commandments is thou shalt not steal. And here over at Netzach, the commandment is thou shalt not commit adultery. And Netzach is all about action and sexuality. It's ruled by Venus. So here we have the story of two sisters, Leah, known as the unloved, and Rachel, known as the beautiful. We don't know much about Leah except that she was tender-eyed. That's the translation of the Hebrew. But the Talmud, the commentary on the Torah, implies that she was weak-eyed, or that she just wasn't very attractive. Leah is the elder daughter and Rachel is the younger daughter. They're daughters of Laban. Now Jacob, having deceived his father to try and get the birthright with the help of his mother, had to leave home, because he had cause and effect issues. You try and trick your family aren't going to be pleased with you, and you're probably going to have to move on. Now, Jacob sees Rachel and falls in love with her beauty and goes to her father Laban, who's a cousin of the family, to say, can I marry your daughter? And Laban, looking at this fine upstanding young man, goes, work for me for 7 years and I will give you my daughter Rachel. So Jacob does, and it says in the Bible that those 7 years were as nothing to him for the love he had for Rachel. And the wedding day arrives, and all the festivities are celebrated with the bride fully veiled, and Jacob and his bride go into the tent, and the marriage is obviously consummated. And then Jacob takes a closer look, and it's Leah. So he's been tricked, and his karma has come right back to him. He tricks his father, he gets tricked in return into marrying the wrong woman. He says to Laban, how can you do this? This is wrong. And Laban says, no, the eldest daughter gets married first. It's tradition. But if you will give Leah a week with you as your wife, and commit to working another 7 years for me, you can marry Rachel at the end of next week. And Jacob says yes. We don't know whether Rachel loved Jacob, but we do know that adultery comes into that marriage the second the two sisters are married to the same man, because they're fighting for him the whole time. Now, the Kabbalistic interpretation of adultery isn't necessarily having sex outside the marriage. What it means is mixing two things together that damage or destroy each other. So you could even say that a marriage that continues, that is unhappy, where both partners are constantly carping at each other, or one is pulling back from the other's spiritual growth, is adulterous. And don't forget that in those days the average marriage was about 15 years, because the lifespan was so much shorter. They didn't go for the 50-year stretches that we go for now. Anyway, Leah and Rachel are at loggerheads simply because Leah, after her week, is pregnant, and Rachel doesn't get pregnant at all. So Jacob, wanting children, will return to Leah's bed, and Rachel, even though she's adored, is not producing the goods. And this is causing horrendous tension. It's a complete soap opera. It could easily be any of the soap operas on television today. And Rachel says to Jacob, give me children or I will die. And Jacob says, not up to me, honey. And Rachel then does more of what we would call the adultery. Although she's supposed to be of the tribe that's believing in the one God, the source energy, the Father that gives us the good things, she wrestles with one of Leah's sons for some mandrakes, which had magical properties for fertility. And she says to them, give me the mandrakes, give me the mandrakes. And Leah says, well, my son got them there for me. And Rachel says, well, you can have a night with my husband if you give me the mandrakes. So Leah says, okie dokie, and goes off and gets pregnant again. So you can see the whole thing's going around in a terrible cycle of jealousy and anger and hate, because Leah knows Rachel is loved, but she's producing the babies. Rachel knows that Leah isn't loved, but she's producing the babies. So the moral of this story is about not getting into adulterous situations, about not fighting down. Rachel then steals her father's idols to another god. So she's worshipping another god as well as the one God. So you can see she's trying to pull in all the different strands of her life, but in a very negative way. And how we know ultimately that it's a negative way is that Rachel does eventually get pregnant. She has 2 children, Joseph and Benjamin. and she dies in childbirth. So her quest to be the one who produces the children at the tribal level ultimately ends in her death.